Mom, I need you to listen carefully and don't interrupt. Ryan and Natalie drugged my wine at dinner. My daughter's voice was shaking on the other end of the phone, but there was steel underneath the fear I didn't drink enough to pass out, but I pretended to. They carried me upstairs to one of the bedrooms and my heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. I'm okay. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911. The local police are here now. Ryan's in handcuffs, and Natalie is having some kind of breakdown in the living room. But Mom, they were planning to. She didn't need to finish that sentence. I already knew exactly what my son-in-law and his mistress had been planning to do to my unconscious daughter. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning something too. 4 months. And by the time I was done, Ryan Brennan would lose everything: his freedom, his fortune, his reputation, and every single person who'd ever believed in him. Welcome to Revenge with Alice. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. To my beautiful subscribers, thank you for being part of this community. Your support means everything, and I see every single comment you leave. You inspire me to keep bringing you these stories. Before we begin, I want to say a quick prayer for you. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're facing, I pray that strength finds you when you need it most. I pray that clarity guides your decisions, that peace settles in your heart, and that you recognize your own worth even when others try to diminish it. May you always have the courage to stand up for yourself and the wisdom to know when to walk away. Amen. Now, let me tell you a story about the sound of someone pounding on my front door at 2:17 in the morning, a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. My name is Patricia Ashford, and I'm 61 years old. That October night, I was pulled from sleep by fists hammering against my door with desperate urgency. When I stumbled downstairs in my robe and threw open the door, my daughter Meredith collapsed into my arms. Her face was so swollen I barely recognized her. Blood dripped from a gash above her eyebrow, running down her cheek in thin red streams. Her silk nightgown, the ivory one I'd given her for her birthday, was torn at the shoulder, exposing bruised skin underneath. Behind her, the October rain fell in heavy sheets, but she was shaking from more than just the cold. Mom, she whispered, her voice raw and broken like shattered glass. I didn't know where else to go. I pulled her inside, my hands trembling as I took in the full extent of her injuries. A black eye, already purple and swelling shut. Split lip, still bleeding. Bruises forming along her collarbone and the unmistakable shape of fingers. Someone had grabbed her there, hard enough to leave marks that would last for weeks. 34 years old. My brilliant daughter who'd graduated top of her class from Stanford Law. Reduced to this, beaten and terrified in the middle of the night, seeking refuge at her mother's house like a wounded animal running from predators. Who did this? I demanded, though I already knew the answer. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but rage was flooding through me like acid eating through metal. Ryan, she sobbed, finally breaking down completely. Her whole body shook with the force of her crying. He came home drunk around midnight. Said Natalie called him crying, said I'd confronted her at the country club today. He said I embarrassed her, embarrassed him. He said I had no right to stop. I cupped her face gently, careful of her injuries. Don't you dare defend him. Not even by explaining his twisted logic, Natalie Warren. The name tasted like poison in my mouth, bitter and toxic. Ryan's 26-year-old assistant at his hedge fund, the woman who'd been sleeping with my son-in-law for the past 8 months. Meredith had discovered the affair when she found hotel receipts tucked into Ryan's car console, confronted him about it, and he'd promised, sworn on everything he held dear, to end it. That was 4 months ago. Clearly, he'd been lying through his perfect teeth. As I cleaned Meredith's wounds in my bathroom, dabbing at the cut above her eye with antiseptic that made her wince, my mind raced through the past 6 years of her marriage to Ryan Brennan. The golden boy of Chicago's financial district. Heir to the Brennan fortune. The man who'd swept my daughter off her feet with his charm, his ambition, and his seemingly genuine devotion. I'd never trusted him. Something about the way he smiled never reached his eyes, like he was always calculating, always measuring people in terms of value and return on investment. The way he'd assess a room and immediately identify who was worth his time and who could be dismissed. But Meredith had been in love, glowing with it, and I'd held my tongue. I'd watched as she put her own career on hold to support his meteoric rise. Watched as she transformed herself into the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinners for his clients, attending galas in designer gowns, smiling graciously through his casual dismissals of her opinions at dinner parties. I'd watched her shrink herself to fit into his world, making herself smaller and smaller until sometimes I wondered if she remembered who she'd been before Ryan Brennan decided she was worth acquiring, and now this. "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone on the bathroom counter. No. Meredith grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, her eyes wide with panic. "Mom, please. You don't understand. Ryan's family, they're connected everywhere. His father plays golf with the police commissioner every Thursday. They have judges over for dinner. They'll make this go away, sweep it under the rug, and then it'll be so much worse for me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He told me tonight that if I ever tried to leave him, if I ever told anyone what really happens behind closed doors, he'd destroy me. He said he'd make sure I never practiced law again. He said he'd tell everyone I was unstable, that I made up lies for attention. And people would believe him, Mom. They always believe him." I looked at my daughter, this brilliant woman who could argue constitutional law before appellate judges and win, who'd once been so fierce and confident, and I saw the fear that had taken root in her. "Then what do you want me to do?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady and calm when everything inside me was screaming for blood. "Just let him get away with this? Let him walk free while you hide?" She looked at me then, really looked at me with those bruised eyes, and I saw something shift in her expression. Something hardening beneath the fear and pain, like steel cooling into an unbreakable blade. "I want you to help me destroy him," she said quietly, each word deliberate and cold. "Not physically, Mom. Legally. Financially. Systematically. I want him to lose everything that matters to him, the way he's taken everything from me. My career, my identity, my sense of self. I want him to understand what it feels like when your entire world crumbles and there's nothing you can do to stop it. My daughter, even battered and broken, was still thinking like the lawyer she'd once been. And in that moment, I saw the opening. I'd been waiting 6 years for, the moment when she'd finally be ready to hear the truth I'd been keeping from her. "Tell me everything," I said quietly, leading her to the kitchen where I could make us both coffee. "And I mean everything, from the beginning. Don't leave out a single detail, no matter how small or embarrassing or painful." What Meredith didn't know, what nobody in our family knew, was that I wasn't just Patricia Ashford, retired high school English teacher and widow. I was Patricia Ashford, silent partner in Ashford and Klein Investigations, one of the most discreet and effective private investigation firms in the Midwest. My late husband Thomas had founded the company 30 years ago, back when private investigators still did most of their work through phone records and physical surveillance. When he died 5 years back from a sudden heart attack, I'd taken over his 50% share. We specialized in exactly the kinds of cases the wealthy and powerful wanted to keep quiet: corporate espionage, infidelity investigations, financial fraud, hidden assets and divorce proceedings, the cases that could ruin reputations and end careers if they ever saw the light of day. I'd been having Ryan Brennan investigated since the day after Meredith called me crying about those hotel receipts. What I'd discovered over the past 4 months was far worse than a simple extramarital affair with his young assistant, but tonight wasn't the time to reveal everything. Tonight was about making sure my daughter was safe, documented, and protected. Tonight was about planting the seeds of Ryan Brennan's absolute destruction, seeds that would grow into a forest of consequences he never saw coming. Over the next 3 hours, as dawn crept through my kitchen windows and turned the sky from black to gray to pale gold, Meredith told me everything: how the affair had started at a company retreat in the Hamptons last winter. Ryan had taken his entire executive team for a weekend of strategic planning and team building. Natalie had been there as his personal assistant, taking notes during meetings, organizing schedules, making sure everyone's needs were met. "I should have known something was wrong when you came back from that trip," Meredith said, staring into her coffee cup like she could read the future in the dark liquid. "He was different. Distracted. He'd smile at his phone and then quickly put it away when I walked into the room. He started working late more often. Started taking business trips that seemed unnecessary." "Did you confront him then?" I asked. No. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was imagining things because we'd been growing apart for a while. We barely talked anymore except about his work or his family or the social calendar. I felt like an employee in my own marriage hired to manage the household and look good at events, but not actually part of any real decisions. She took a shaky breath. Then I found the hotel receipts. For different hotels over 2 months, all charged to his personal credit card. When I asked him about them, he got angry. Said I was snooping through his things, invading his privacy. But eventually he admitted it. He cried, Mom. He actually cried and said Natalie meant nothing, that it was just physical, that he loved me and would end it immediately, but he didn't end it, I said flatly. No. He just got better at hiding it. Meredith's voice was bitter. He opened a separate credit card I didn't know about. Started using cash more. And Ryan became more controlling about everything else. He wanted access to my phone, said we shouldn't have secrets from each other. He limited my access to our joint accounts, said he was trying to organize our finances better. He started questioning where I went, who I talked to, how I spent my time. Classic isolation tactics, I murmured. Cutting you off from resources and support systems. I didn't see it that way at the time. I just thought he was being anxious about the marriage, trying to rebuild trust. But then Natalie started showing up places where I was. At the country club where I have lunch with friends. At charity events Ryan and I attended together. And she'd be wearing jewelry I recognized, pieces that appeared on our credit card statements. Meredith's hands clenched around her coffee mug. 3 weeks ago, I saw a charge for a diamond bracelet from Cartier. $15,000. I asked Ryan about it, and he said it was an anniversary gift he was saving for me. But yesterday at the club, I saw Natalie having lunch with Ryan's mother. And Natalie was wearing that bracelet. My hands tightened on my own mug. Beverly was having lunch with your husband's mistress. They were laughing together like old friends. Beverly was touching Natalie's arm, showing her photos on her phone. When I walked past their table, Beverly barely acknowledged me. Just a cold nod before she turned back to Natalie and continued their conversation like I didn't exist. What did you do? I followed Natalie to the parking lot and confronted her. I kept my voice calm, polite even. I just asked her to please end things with Ryan, to let us try to save our marriage. And you know what she did? Meredith's voice cracked. She smiled at me. This cold, superior smile. And she said, Ryan's already made his choice, sweetheart. You're just too stubborn to accept it. I felt rage building in my chest like pressure in a sealed container. And then, I went home and told Ryan what happened. I expected him to be angry at Natalie for being so cruel. Instead, he accused me of harassing her, of making a scene at the club, of embarrassing his family. He said people were already talking about how unstable I've become. He said I need to get help. Meredith's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He came back around midnight, completely drunk. I could smell the alcohol from across the room. He was screaming that Natalie had called him in tears because I'd threatened her in the parking lot, which is a complete lie, Mom. I never threatened her. I just asked her to leave my husband alone. I believe you, I said firmly. He grabbed me by the hair and dragged me across the bedroom. Said I was ruining everything he'd built, that I was an embarrassment to the Brennan name. He hit me, and when I tried to get away, he hit me again. And again. Her voice broke completely. I thought he was going to kill me. The look in his eyes, it wasn't even anger anymore. It was like he hated me, like I was something disgusting he needed to destroy. I pulled my daughter into my arms and let her cry against my shoulder, feeling her tears soak through my robe. But my mind was already racing ahead, already formulating the plan that would take Ryan Brennan apart piece by piece. Stop, I said gently when her sobs finally subsided. I don't need to hear the rest of what he did. But I need you to tell me, do you want out of this marriage? Truly, completely out. She pulled back and looked at me with those bruised eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years, the fierce determination of the woman who'd fought her way to the top of her law school class. I want him to pay for what he's done, she said, her voice steady now. To me, to us, to every promise he ever made and broke. I want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything, your reputation, your future, your sense of safety in the world. I want him destroyed, Mom. Completely destroyed. I stood up and walked to my study, returning with a thick manila envelope I'd been keeping in my safe. I placed it on the kitchen table between us, and Meredith stared at it like it might explode. What's this? She asked. Insurance, I said simply. I've had investigators watching Ryan since last spring, since the day after you called me crying about those hotel receipts. What you don't know, what I haven't told you yet, is that the affair with Natalie is the least of his problems. I opened the manila envelope and spread the documents across my kitchen table like a prosecutor laying out evidence for a jury. Bank statements, email printouts, photographs with timestamps and locations. Meredith's eyes widened as she took in the sheer volume of material. Mom, what is all this? Proof that your husband is a criminal, I said, pulling out the first set of bank statements. Ryan's been running a Ponzi scheme through a shell corporation called Brennan Capital Ventures. He's been using new investor money to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning millions into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Meredith's hands shook as she picked up the documents. Numbers jumped out at her, transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars, falsified quarterly reports, fabricated investment returns. This is embezzlement, she whispered. This is federal fraud. Mom, how did you? My late husband Thomas founded a private investigation firm 30 years ago. When he died, I took over his share of the business. We specialize in exactly these kinds of cases, wealthy people doing terrible things they think they're too connected to face consequences for. I watched the realization dawn on my daughter's face. You've been investigating Ryan? For months, since April. The moment you called me crying about those hotel receipts, I knew something was deeply wrong. A man who cheats on his wife is often hiding other secrets. So I had my partner Raymond Klein put our best investigators on Ryan. What they found? I shook my head. It's worse than I imagined. I pulled out another photograph and slid it across the table. Ryan and Natalie entering a luxury condo building in the Gold Coast neighborhood, one of the most expensive areas in Chicago. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. That's the apartment Ryan keeps for Natalie, I explained. 2 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet, 22nd floor with views of Lake Michigan. He's paying $8,000 a month in rent, all funded through his fraudulent investment scheme. Meredith stared at the photo, her jaw clenched tight. He told me we couldn't afford to renovate our kitchen. He said we needed to be careful with money because the market was uncertain. He was lying. The Brennan family is worth $40 million, and Ryan's been skimming millions more from his investors. But here's the really interesting part. I pulled out a second photograph, and Meredith gasped audibly. It showed Frederick Brennan, Ryan's father, the patriarch of the family, entering the same luxury condo building. The timestamp was 3 hours after Ryan and Natalie's arrival, on a different day. That's from 2 weeks ago, I said quietly. Your father-in-law has been using the same apartment Ryan keeps for Natalie. Different days, different women. We've documented him with at least 3 separate women over the past 2 months. Oh my God. Meredith's voice was hollow. Beverly has no idea. Beverly knows exactly what her husband is. She's known for decades. The Brennan family operates on a simple principle: appearance is everything, and loyalty to the family trumps all other considerations. That's why Beverly can have lunch with your husband's mistress and act like it's perfectly normal. In her world, it is normal. I pulled up more documents, credit card statements showing charges at expensive restaurants, jewelry stores, weekend trips to places Ryan claimed to be traveling for business. Hotel rooms booked under assumed names. Charges to escort services that made my stomach turn. Ryan learned from the best, I continued. Frederick Brennan has been cheating on Beverly for their entire marriage. He's had mistresses, affairs, one-night stands, all overlooked as long as he maintained the family's public image and kept the money flowing. Meredith was crying again, but these were different tears. Not the desperate sobs from earlier, but quiet tears of rage and realization. How long have you known all this? She asked. Since June. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you, waiting until I had enough evidence to make sure Ryan couldn't wriggle out of this or make it disappear with his family's lawyers and connections. But I never imagined he'd. My voice cracked. I should have told you sooner. I should have gotten you out before it came to violence.No. Meredith's voice was firm, stronger than it had been all night. If you'd told me sooner, I might have confronted him emotionally, stupidly. I might have given him warning that we knew. This way, we have time to plan. Time to make sure every piece is in place before we strike. She looked up at me, and I saw my daughter returning the sharp, brilliant woman who'd once argued cases before appellate judges and never lost a "What's your plan?" she asked. I smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. First, you're filing for divorce. But not yet. First, we're going to make sure Ryan believes everything is fine, that you're scared and submissive. You're going to go back to him, what? Meredith stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Mom, I can't go back there. He almost killed me tonight. You can, and you will. Because here's what you don't understand about men like Ryan, they're only truly dangerous when they think they're losing control. Right now, he thinks he's broken you. He thinks you'll crawl back, apologize for making a scene about Natalie, and accept your place in his world. So that's exactly what you're going to do, temporarily. I pulled out my phone and showed Meredith a series of text messages I'd already drafted while she was telling me her story. You're going to send these from your phone. Apologetic, frightened, begging him to forgive you for causing problems with Natalie. You're going to tell him you understand now that you overreacted, that you were being paranoid and jealous. Meredith looked like she might be sick. I can't write those words. Mom, I can't grovel to him after what he did to me. You can, because it's temporary theater. While you're playing the repentant wife, I'm going to be finalizing our case with the SEC and the FBI. My partner Raymond has contacts who've been waiting for enough evidence to move on the Brennan family's financial dealings. This, I tapped the envelope, is exactly what they need. How long? Meredith asked. How long do I have to pretend? 2 weeks. Maybe 3 at most. Can you do it? My daughter straightened her spine, touched her swollen eye gingerly, and nodded. If it means watching him lose everything, his freedom, his money, his precious reputation, I can endure anything. I pulled her into my arms, careful of her injuries. That's my girl. Now let me teach you how to play the long game. Your father was a master at building cases that destroyed people who thought they were untouchable. I learned from the best. What neither of us could have predicted was just how deep Ryan's betrayal went, or how spectacularly his world was about to implode. But that would come later. First, we had work to do. I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Susan Chen, my personal physician who I'd known for 20 years. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. Patricia? It's 4 a.m. I need you at my house immediately. Bring your medical bag and your camera. Domestic violence case, and I need everything documented. Susan's voice sharpened instantly, all traces of sleep gone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While we waited, I took my own photographs of Meredith's injuries with my phone. Close-ups of her black eye, the split lip, the bruises on her collarbone shaped like fingers. I photographed the torn nightgown, made notes with precise timestamps about when she'd arrived at my door and exactly what she'd said. This feels clinical, Meredith said quietly as I worked. It needs to be. When we get to court, and we will get to court, we need documentation that's unimpeachable. Medical records, photographs, contemporaneous notes. Everything has to be perfect because Ryan's lawyers will try to discredit you. They'll say you're making it up, that you fell downstairs or walked into a door. We're not giving them that opportunity. Dr. Chen arrived 18 minutes later, her medical bag in one hand and a professional camera in the other. She took one look at Meredith and her expression hardened. Who did this to you? My husband, Meredith said quietly. Susan nodded grimly and got to work. She photographed every injury from multiple angles, measured the size and depth of each bruise, documented the swelling and the cuts. She checked Meredith for signs of concussion, examined her ribs for fractures, tested her range of motion. You're going to need these photos, Susan said, downloading the images onto a secure drive. I'm also creating a confidential medical record that we'll keep separate from your regular file. If anyone tries to subpoena your medical records, they'll have to go through a separate legal process to access this documentation. Thank you, Meredith whispered. Don't thank me. Just promise me you're not going back to him. Meredith and I exchanged glances. She's going back temporarily, I said. As part of a larger plan. Susan looked at me sharply. Patricia, that's incredibly dangerous. I know. But it's necessary. Ryan needs to believe he's won, that Meredith is properly intimidated. If she doesn't go back, he'll know something is wrong. He'll start covering his tracks, destroying evidence, moving money we can't trace. We need him complacent and confident for the next 2 weeks. Susan shook her head but didn't argue further. At least let me give you something for the pain, she said to Meredith, pulling out a prescription pad. After Susan left, I made Meredith a proper breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. She needed to eat, needed to keep her strength up for what was coming. Mom, you still haven't told me everything, Meredith said, pushing eggs around her plate. What exactly did your investigators find beyond the financial fraud? I hesitated, then decided she deserved to know the full truth. Ryan has been cheating on you for far longer than 8 months with Natalie. We've documented at least 4 other affairs over the past 3 years. Short-term relationships with women he met through work or at social events. He's been careful, always using cash, burner phones, hotels in different neighborhoods. Meredith's fork clattered against her plate. There's more, I continued gently. He's been secretly recording conversations in your home. We found the audio equipment during a sweep of your house last month when you were at that charity luncheon. He's been recording me? In my own home, in the bedroom, the bathroom, your home office. Everywhere. We think he's been building his own case against you, gathering material he could use to claim you're unstable or unfit if you ever tried to leave him. That's illegal, extremely. In Illinois, you need consent from both parties to record conversations. What Ryan's been doing is a Class 4 felony. Just one more crime to add to the list. Meredith sat back in her chair, processing everything. He really was planning to destroy me if I tried to leave, yes. But now we're going to destroy him first. The sun was fully up by the time Meredith was ready to leave. I'd carefully applied concealer to hide the worst of her bruising, professional makeup techniques I'd learned from a former theater actress on our investigative team who specialized in undercover work. You're going to tell Ryan you spent the night at a hotel, I instructed. That you were too ashamed to come home, too scared to face him. You're going to apologize for causing problems with Natalie. I feel sick, Meredith admitted. I know. But remember, this is temporary. 2 weeks, and then you never have to see him again except across a courtroom. Meredith pulled out her phone and typed out the messages I'd drafted. Her hands shook as she hit send. Ryan, I'm so sorry about last night. I overreacted about Natalie. You were right, I was being paranoid and jealous. I spent the night at a hotel because I was too ashamed to come home. Can we please talk? I want to fix this. The response came back within 30 seconds, come home. We'll talk. No apology. No concern about where she'd been or if she was okay. Just a command, cold and clinical. That's his style, Meredith said bitterly. Everything is about control with him. I walked her to her car and hugged her tightly. Remember, you're playing a role. Whatever he says, whatever he does, you're gathering information. Mental notes about everything. And if you're ever in danger, truly in danger, you leave immediately and call 911. This plan isn't worth your life. I know. She pulled back and managed a small smile. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Now go be the world's best actress. I watched her car disappear down the street, then immediately picked up my phone and dialed Raymond Klein. He answered on the first ring. Patricia. It's barely 7 in the morning. This must be important. It's time, I said simply. Ryan Brennan beat my daughter last night. I want him destroyed completely, utterly, without possibility of recovery. Raymond was silent for a long moment. I'll make the calls. The SEC has been chomping at the bit for months waiting for enough evidence on the Brennan family. How much time do you need? 2 weeks to get Meredith fully extracted and protected. Then you can unleash hell, consider it done. And Patricia? I'm sorry about Meredith. But I'm not sorry about what's coming for that bastard. Neither am I. What I hadn't told Meredith yet was that I'd also been documenting Ryan's pattern of abuse for longer than she knew. The accidental bruise on her arm 6 months ago that she'd blamed on walking into a door, I'd photographed it. The time she'd shown up to lunch with me wearing a turtleneck in 90-degree July heat, claiming she was cold, I'd noted it. The increasing isolation from her friends. The way she'd stopped talking about her own dreams and desires, only discussing Ryan's career and Ryan's family and Ryan's needs. I'd seen it all, documented it all, and hated myself for waiting to act. But Thomas had taught me that the best revenge requires patience. You don't strike until you have everything in place, until your opponent has no escape routes, no safety nets, no way to wriggle free from the consequences of their actions, and now, finally, we were ready. Over the next 2 weeks, I set my plan in motion with military precision. Raymond delivered the Brennan files to contacts at the FBI and SEC. Federal investigators began quietly building their case, pulling years of financial records, tracing the web of shell companies and fraudulent transactions. They were thorough. They were patient. And they were very, very angry about what they were finding. Meanwhile, Meredith played her role perfectly. The chastened wife, grateful for Ryan's forgiveness, attending his business dinners and smiling through his casual cruelties. She even accepted Natalie's presence at a company gala, standing beside her husband while his mistress circulated among their guests wearing a diamond bracelet Meredith recognized from their own jewelry box. She called me every night after Ryan fell asleep, her voice tight with controlled rage. "That he's been so sweet since I came back," she said on night 3. "Buying me flowers, taking me to dinner, telling everyone how happy we are. It's like he's performing for an audience." "That he is," I replied. "He's performing for himself, convincing himself that everything is fine, that he successfully put you back in your place." Natalie was at the gala tonight. She was wearing my grandmother's bracelet, Mom. The one Ryan supposedly had cleaned last month. She kept touching it while she talked to people, making sure everyone saw it. Did anyone say anything? A few people gave me sympathetic looks. Most just pretended not to notice. That's the thing about our social circle, everyone sees everything, but nobody ever acknowledges uncomfortable truths. It's all about maintaining appearances. 2 more weeks, I reminded her. You can endure anything for 2 more weeks. Meanwhile, I'd arranged my own special attention for Natalie Warren. My firm employed a brilliant young investigator named Jordan Mills who had a particular talent for social engineering, the art of gaining people's trust and extracting information without them realizing they were being played. Within 3 days, Jordan had accidentally met Natalie at her gym, struck up a conversation about difficult relationships, and gradually wormed into her confidence. Natalie, desperate for a sympathetic ear, started confiding everything. Jordan reported back to me daily. "She believes Ryan is going to leave Meredith," Jordan said on day 5. "He's apparently told her that the divorce is imminent, that he's just waiting for the right time to make it official. He's promised her an engagement ring, 2 carats, princess cut, platinum setting. Of course he has. There's more. He's told her they're going to move to a house in Lake Forest together. 5 bedrooms, on the water. He's apparently been taking her to look at properties." I felt cold rage settle in my chest. Ryan wasn't just having an affair, he was building an entire fantasy future with Natalie while still married to my daughter, all while knowing he had no intention of actually leaving. Natalie was just another transaction to him, another resource to be used and discarded when convenient. "Keep recording everything," I told Jordan. "Every conversation, every promise he's made to her. It's all evidence of fraud and deception that'll strengthen our case." But the real masterpiece was still being constructed behind the scenes. Raymond's FBI contacts had discovered something even I hadn't known about. Ryan wasn't working alone. His father Frederick was directly involved in the Ponzi scheme, using his own connections and reputation to bring in new investors. They've been running this operation for 7 years, Raymond told me during one of our planning sessions. Started small, gradually grew it. The total amount they've stolen from investors? $43 million. I let out a low whistle. That's federal prison for decades. Minimum 20 years, probably more. And here's the beautiful part, the FBI is building cases against both Ryan and Frederick simultaneously. When they move, they're taking down the entire Brennan financial empire in one coordinated strike. What about Beverly and the rest of the family? Beverly will likely avoid criminal charges, but she'll be financially destroyed. Everything they own is tied up in assets that'll be seized. The house, the cars, the country club memberships, all gone. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of watching powerful men destroy lives without consequences. Tired of seeing women like my daughter sacrificed on the altar of male ego and ambition, but that was about to change. On Thursday evening, exactly 13 days after Meredith had collapsed on my doorstep, she called me from Ryan's downtown office. Her voice was tight with controlled excitement. "Mom, Ryan just told me he's taking me to the Hamptons this weekend. A second honeymoon, he called it. He wants to start fresh and put everything behind us." My blood ran cold. "Don't go. I have to. If I refuse now, he'll know something's wrong." Besides, her voice dropped to a whisper, his secretary just confirmed he's bought tickets for 3 people. Guess who's already in the Hamptons at the beach house? Natalie. Of course it was Natalie. "He's planning something," I said. "Meredith, this feels wrong. This feels dangerous." "I know. But Mom, I need you to do something for me while I'm gone. I need you to go to our house with your legal team and remove everything I care about. My grandmother's jewelry, my personal files, my photographs. Everything. I have a feeling that when I come back from this trip, there won't be a marriage left to save, and I want to make sure I'm the one who controls what happens next." She was right, and we both knew it. Ryan was planning some final humiliation or confrontation that would give him leverage. But so were we. That Saturday morning, while Meredith flew to the Hamptons with her husband, I executed the extraction plan with military precision. Barbara Steele, one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in Illinois, arrived at my house at 8 o'clock sharp. She brought with her a court order I'd obtained based on Meredith's documented injuries and legitimate fear of property destruction. "This gives us legal authority to enter the Brennan residence and remove anything that belongs solely to Meredith," Barbara explained, reviewing the paperwork one final time. "Family heirlooms, personal documents, anything with clear provenance as her individual property." "What about the things Ryan might claim are marital assets?" I asked. "We document everything. Photograph what we take, photograph what we leave. If he challenges us later, we have proof we acted in good faith under legal authority." We arrived at the Brennan mansion at 9:30. The house was massive, 8,000 square feet of stone and glass in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. I'd been here dozens of times for family dinners and holidays, always feeling like an outsider in this world of old money and careful manners. Now I walked through the front door with a key Meredith had given me, and it felt like entering enemy territory. "Start with her personal bedroom," Barbara directed the 3 paralegals she'd brought along. "Then the home office, then any storage areas where she kept personal items." I headed straight for Meredith's closet, a room larger than most people's bedrooms. Her clothes hung in neat rows, organized by color and season. But I wasn't interested in the designer dresses Ryan had bought her. I was looking for the safe I knew she kept hidden behind a false paneled. It took me 10 minutes to find it, another 5 to open it using the combination she'd given me. Inside were the things that truly mattered: her grandmother's diamond earrings, her mother's wedding ring, the pearl necklace that had been in our family for 3 generations. Also inside, her Stanford Law diploma, her bar admission certificate, and a leather journal I'd never seen before. I pulled out the journal and opened it to the first page. Meredith's handwriting, dated 3 years ago. "Ryan hit me today for the first time. Not hard, just a slap across the face when I questioned why he was working so late again. He apologized immediately, said he was stressed about work, that I'd pushed him too far. I want to believe him. I need to believe him. My hands shook as I turned the pages. Entry after entry detailing escalating abuse. Emotional manipulation. Financial control. Isolation from friends. And yes, physical violence always followed by apologies, always blamed on stress or Meredith's behavior. Mom? One of the paralegals appeared in the closet doorway. We found something in the home office you need to see. I followed her to Ryan's office, where the other paralegal had opened his desk drawer. Inside were documents, divorce papers, already drawn up, with terms so one-sided they were almost comical. Ryan would keep everything, the house, the investments, the cars. Meredith would receive nothing, not even temporary support. These are dated from 6 months ago, the paralegal said. He's been planning to divorce her for a while, but on his terms, Barbara added, reading over my shoulder. He wanted to force her into accepting nothing so he could keep his assets and move on to his next wife, probably Natalie, without financial complications. The beating wasn't spontaneous rage, I said quietly. It was calculated. He was trying to break her spirit enough that she'd sign whatever papers he put in front of her. Barbara's expression hardened. This gets added to our evidence file. Premeditation matters in abuse cases. We continued through the house methodically. In the guest room, we found Meredith's laptop hidden in the closet behind winter coats, exactly where she'd told us it would be. The laptop Ryan didn't know existed, the one she'd been using to document everything. I powered it on and found folders full of evidence, screenshots of text messages between Ryan and Natalie, emails from Ryan's computer that she'd forwarded to herself during the brief period he'd given her his password, detailed notes about every suspicious charge on their credit cards. My daughter had been planning her escape longer than I'd known. She'd been gathering evidence, building her case, waiting for the right moment to strike. I'd never been more proud of her strategic mind, even as my heart broke for what she'd endured. She's been playing the long game, Barbara observed, reading over my shoulder. Smart woman, she learned from the best, I replied, thinking of Thomas and all the cases he'd built that destroyed people who thought they were untouchable. By 2 o'clock, we'd removed everything of value that belonged to Meredith. The movers loaded boxes into the truck while I did one final sweep of the house, making sure we hadn't missed anything. That's when I found the camera in the bedroom. It was hidden inside a smoke detector, professional-grade equipment that would capture everything happening in the room. I called our tech specialist, who confirmed there were cameras in the bathroom, the home office, even the kitchen. This is a complete surveillance system, he said. Everything feeds to a remote server. He's been watching her, recording her, probably for months. Can you tell what he's done with the footage? I'd need to access the server, but based on the file structure, he's been saving everything. Hours and hours of footage of your daughter in her own home, thinking she had privacy. I felt sick. This wasn't just about control, this was about violation at the deepest level. Ryan had turned their home into a prison where Meredith was constantly monitored, constantly watched, never safe even in the most intimate moments. Copy everything, I told the tech specialist. I want proof of what he's been doing. By the time we left, it was nearly 5 o'clock. The Brennan mansion looked the same from the outside, but inside, every trace of Meredith had been carefully removed. When Ryan returned from the Hamptons, he'd find his wife's belongings gone, a clear message that she wasn't coming back, but that message would come too late for him to do anything about it. I was home, reviewing the documents we'd recovered, when my phone rang at 8:30 that evening. Meredith's name on the screen made my heart leap into my throat. Mom. Her voice was shaking but controlled. I need you to listen carefully and don't interrupt. Ryan and Natalie drugged my wine at dinner. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Meredith, I'm okay. Let me finish. I didn't drink enough to pass out, but I pretended to. I recognized the taste after just one sip, bitter, chemical. I kept the glass to my lips but let most of it spill onto my napkin when they weren't looking. Then I acted like the drug was taking effect. Where are you now? Locked in the bathroom. They carried me upstairs to one of the bedrooms about 20 minutes ago. I heard them talking while they thought I was unconscious. Mom, they were planning to, her voice broke. They had a man waiting. They were going to stage photographs of me in bed with him, make it look like I was cheating. They were going to use the pictures to force me into signing divorce papers that gave Ryan everything. Rage flooded through me so intense I could barely breathe. Did you call 911? First thing I did after I locked the bathroom door. The local police are here now. I can hear them downstairs. Ryan's screaming something about this being a misunderstanding. Natalie's crying. I'm coming to you, I said, already grabbing my car keys. Don't open that bathroom door for anyone except the police. Do you understand? No one else did. I understand. Mom, there's camera equipment in the bedroom. Lights, a professional camera on a tripod. They were planning to film everything. The police will document all of it. Stay on the phone with me until they get to you. The next few minutes felt like hours. I could hear muffled voices through Meredith's phone, footsteps on stairs, someone pounding on the bathroom door. This is Officer Matthews with the Southampton Police Department, a male voice called. Ma'am, are you hurt? Can you open the door? Don't open it yet, I told Meredith. Make him slide his badge under the door so you can verify it's really police, she relayed my instructions. A moment later, I heard her unlock the door. I'm okay, she told the officer. But my husband and his girlfriend drugged my wine. They were planning to assault me and photograph it. The wine glass is on the bedroom dresser. You can test it for drugs. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come downstairs and give a statement. I'm on my way, I told Meredith. For hours, maybe less. Don't answer any questions without a lawyer present. Barbara's already on her way, Meredith said. I called her right after 9/11. Smart girl. Even in crisis, she was thinking strategically. I made the drive to the Hamptons in 3 hours and 40 minutes, breaking every speed limit and not caring. By the time I arrived, the scene was controlled chaos. Police cars filled the circular driveway of the Brennan Beach House, a massive contemporary structure right on the ocean. Officers were photographing the bedroom where the assault had been planned. Evidence technicians were bagging the wine bottle, the camera equipment, the laptop that contained Ryan's detailed planning documents, and Ryan Brennan was being loaded into a police car in handcuffs. He saw me as I pulled up, and the look on his face was pure rage. This is your fault, he screamed across the driveway. You turned her against me. You poisoned her mind. This is all you're doing. I ignored him completely and walked past like he didn't exist. Inside, I found Meredith wrapped in a blanket on the living room couch, giving her statement to a detective while Barbara sat beside her. When Meredith saw me, she stood up and walked into my arms. This time she wasn't crying. She was steady, clear-eyed, absolutely certain that it's over, she said quietly. Finally, it's over. Not quite, I replied, pulling back to look at her. But it will be. The detective handling Meredith's case was a woman in her 50s named Detective Sarah Rodriguez. She had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much violence against women, and the determined set to her jaw of someone who wasn't going to let another abuser walk free. We've got him cold, she told me and Barbara while Meredith gave her formal statement in another room. The wine bottle tested positive for rohypnol, a significant dose that would have rendered her unconscious for hours. We've got the camera equipment set up in the bedroom, lights positioned for optimal filming angles. And we've got recordings on his phone. Recordings? Barbara leaned forward. Mr. Brennan apparently liked to document his plans. We found voice memos on his phone where he and Ms. Warren discussed exactly what they were going to do. How they'd position her, what angles would be most convincing, how they'd use the photographs to force her into a divorce settlement. Detective Rodriguez's expression was disgusted. He also had contact information for the man they'd hired to be in the photographs. We've already picked him up. He's an actor from Manhattan who thought he was being hired for what he called an elaborate prank. He had no idea he was going to be part of a sexual assault. What about Natalie Warren? I asked. She's in the other room having a complete breakdown. Crying, hyperventilating, claiming she didn't know it would go this far. But we have her voice on those recordings too, discussing logistics, talking about camera angles. She was fully complicit. What are the charges? Conspiracy to commit sexual assault, administering drugs without consent, attempted fraud. And those are just the state charges. I understand the FBI has their own interest in Mr. Brennan. Barbara and I exchanged glances. Financial crimes, Barbara said carefully. Separate investigation that's been ongoing for several months, Detective Rodriguez smiled grimly. Then Mr. Brennan is looking at decades in prison between state and federal charges. Good. Men like him think they're untouchable because they have money and connections. It's satisfying to prove them wrong. By midnight, all the evidence had been collected and catalogued. The wine bottle, the camera equipment, Ryan's phone with all its damning recordings, the laptop with his detailed planning documents. Even the hotel room they'd booked for the actor, paid for with Ryan's credit card. Everything documented. Everything preserved. Everything admissible in court. Natalie Warren had been arrested and was being held in a local jail cell. She'd asked for a lawyer, then immediately tried to turn on Ryan, offering to testify against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. They always turn on each other, Detective Rodriguez observed. These conspiracies fall apart the moment people realize they're facing real consequences. Ryan was being held without bail. The judge who'd handled his arraignment, a woman who'd clearly read the police reports, had declared him a flight risk given his family's wealth and international connections. Mr. Brennan, you're accused of planning to drug and assault your wife, then use the resulting photographs to coerce her into an unfavorable divorce settlement, the judge had said. These are serious charges that suggest you're willing to commit horrific acts to maintain control over assets. I see no reason to believe you wouldn't flee the country if given the opportunity. Bail is denied. By Sunday morning, the story had broken nationally. Wealthy Chicago hedge fund manager arrested for attempting to drug and assault his wife. The media descended on the Hamptons, on Ryan's Chicago office, on the Brennan family mansion. Frederick and Beverly Brennan released a terse statement through their lawyers. We are shocked and appalled by the allegations against our son. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement. Behind the scenes, I knew they were scrambling. Frederick was facing his own federal investigation. The family's assets were being traced and frozen. Their carefully constructed empire of wealth and influence was crumbling in real time. Monday morning, exactly 14 days after Meredith had collapsed on my doorstep, Raymond Klein called with news. The FBI just executed search warrants on Ryan's office, his home, and his father's investment firm. They're seizing computers, financial records, everything. The SEC has also frozen all Brennan family accounts pending investigation. How bad is it for them? Catastrophic. They're looking at minimum 20 years federal prison for the financial crimes alone. The Ponzi scheme, the embezzlement, the fraud, it's all documented. And with the attempted assault charges in New York, Ryan's looking at 30-plus years total. What about Frederick? He's trying to cut a deal, but the prosecutors aren't interested. They want to make an example of the whole family. Too many wealthy people think they can commit crimes without consequences. The FBI wants to send a message to I closed my eyes, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction but close to it. And Beverly will avoid criminal charges, but she's financially destroyed. Everything they own is tied to assets that are being seized. The mansion, the vacation homes, the cars, the art collection all gone. She'll be lucky to walk away with enough money for a modest apartment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Beverly Brennan, who'd had lunch with her son's mistress and treated my daughter like she was disposable, would now experience what it felt like to lose everything. That afternoon, Natalie Warren's lawyer contacted the prosecutors with a deal. She would testify against Ryan in exchange for a reduced sentence. Within 24 hours, she'd given them everything: detailed testimony about the affair, Ryan's explicit admissions that he was planning to divorce Meredith but wanted to make sure she didn't get a dime, his instructions about drugging the wine, his directions about how to stage the photographs. And most damning of all, she'd been making her own recordings of their conversations. Natalie had been afraid Ryan would eventually turn on her too, so she created her own insurance policy by documenting everything he said. Those recordings destroyed any possible defense Ryan might have mounted. In his own words, captured on Natalie's phone, he discussed drugging his wife, staging the assault, using the photographs for blackmail. He even joked about how easy it would be because Meredith trusted him completely, that he never saw it coming, Raymond said when I told him about the recordings. He was so confident in his control over both women that he never considered they might protect themselves. Narcissists never do, I replied. They can't imagine a world where they're not the smartest person in the room. By Wednesday, Ryan's hedge fund had collapsed completely. Investors were fleeing, demanding their money back. But there was no money. It had all been spent maintaining the Brennan family's lifestyle and funding Ryan's various affairs. Employees found themselves suddenly jobless, their retirement accounts decimated by Ryan's fraud. Several filed lawsuits. More threatened criminal complaints. The SEC announced a formal investigation that would likely result in additional charges. The Brennan name, once golden in Chicago's financial circles, had become toxic. Country clubs revoked memberships. Charity boards removed the family from leadership positions. Friends who'd attended their parties and galas suddenly claimed they'd always suspected something was wrong. The social destruction was almost as complete as the financial and legal destruction, and through it all, Meredith stayed strong. She gave interviews to investigators, sat for depositions, provided evidence. She was calm, articulate, and absolutely certain about what had happened to her. "How are you holding up?" I asked her during one of our daily phone calls. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "I keep waiting to fall apart, to break down, but mostly I just feel free. Like I've been carrying this enormous weight for years and someone finally lifted it off my shoulders. That's healthy. You're processing the trauma in real time instead of suppressing it." "I'm also angry, Mom. Furious. Every day they find more evidence of what Ryan was doing, the surveillance cameras in our house, the recordings he made, the women before Natalie. I was just one more thing he owned and controlled, but not anymore. No. Not anymore. 6 months after that terrible night at 2 a.m, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Ryan Brennan's sentencing hearing. He'd lost weight in jail, his expensive suits replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his confident swagger replaced by the hunched posture of a man who finally understood he wasn't getting out of this. The prosecutor stood before the judge, laying out the full scope of Ryan's crimes. "Your Honor, Mr. Brennan orchestrated a financial fraud that stole $43 million from innocent investors. He used that money to fund a lavish lifestyle while those same investors lost their retirement savings, their children's college funds, their financial security. When his wife discovered evidence of his crimes and his infidelity, he didn't seek reconciliation. He planned to drug and assault her, to create false evidence he could use to force her into a divorce settlement that would leave her destitute." The prosecutor paused, letting that sink in. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was calculated, methodical cruelty by a man who believed his wealth and connections put him above the law. He was wrong. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the sentencing guidelines carefully. Mr. Brennan, I've presided over many cases in my 30 years on the bench. I've seen people commit crimes out of poverty, addiction, mental illness. I've seen people make terrible mistakes in moments of weakness. But I've rarely seen such cold-blooded calculation as you displayed. You didn't just commit fraud, you destroyed lives systematically, without remorse, because you believed you could. Ryan's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand. The financial crimes alone warrant 22 years in federal prison. The conspiracy charges in New York, the attempted assault, the drugging add another 10 years. Mr. Brennan, you will serve 32 years in federal prison. You'll be eligible for parole when you're 73 years old. Ryan's face went white. His mother, Beverly, let out a strangled sob from the gallery. But I felt nothing except grim satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Frederick Brennan received a similar sentence 3 weeks later. Father and son would spend the next 3 decades in prison, their empire reduced to rubble, their names synonymous with fraud and abuse. Natalie Warren received a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation in exchange for her testimony. She lost her job, her apartment, her reputation. According to Jordan's final report, she'd moved back to Ohio where she was living with her parents and working at a coffee shop, trying to rebuild a life from the ashes of her choices. I should have felt sorry for her, but I couldn't. She'd knowingly participated in a plan to assault an unconscious woman. Whatever consequences she faced were earned. Meredith's divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Barbara Steele was ruthless, laying out every piece of evidence we'd collected, the abuse documentation, the financial fraud, the surveillance cameras, the affair. Ryan's attorneys tried to argue that Meredith had been complicit in the financial crimes, that she must have known what her husband was doing. But our evidence proved otherwise. Bank statements showing she'd been deliberately kept off key accounts, emails where Ryan explicitly discussed hiding information from her, testimony from his own employees about his secretive business practices. The prenuptial agreement Ryan had insisted on became worthless the moment his criminal conduct was proven. Illinois law was clear: criminal activity voided any contractual limitations on asset division. The judge awarded Meredith 70% of the remaining marital assets, what little remained after federal seizures. More importantly, she received full restoration of her maiden name, a court order permanently barring Ryan from contacting her, and a settlement that included Ryan's admission of abuse in the official record.OU free, Barbara told her when the final papers were signed. Legally, financially, completely free, Meredith sat in Barbara's office, holding the divorce decree in her hands like it was the most precious document in the world. "I didn't think this day would ever come," she said quietly. "For so long, I felt trapped. Like the walls were closing in and there was no escape. And now you get to decide who you want to be," I finished. "Not who Ryan wanted you to be. Not who his family expected. Just you." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but they were good tears this time. Tears of relief and released. "I want to help other women," she said. "Women trapped like I was, who don't know how to get out safely. I want to rebuild my law practice, specialize in divorce cases for abuse survivors." "Then that's exactly what you'll do." 1 year after that night at my doorstep, Meredith stood in a courtroom again, but this time not as a victim or a defendant. This time as an attorney, arguing a case for a woman whose husband had tried to hide assets in offshore accounts during their divorce. Meredith demolished his case in 45 minutes of precise, devastating cross-examination. She'd learned every trick, every deception, every manipulation that abusers used because she'd lived through them all. Now she was using that knowledge to protect other women. The judge ruled in her client's favor, awarding full asset disclosure and substantial alimony. Afterward, her client hugged her in the courthouse hallway. "You saved my life," the woman said. "I didn't think anyone would believe me about what he was doing." "I believe you," Meredith replied firmly. "And I'll make sure the court believes you too." "That's a promise." Her practice grew rapidly. Word spread in the community about the divorce lawyer who specialized in complex financial cases and abuse situations. Women started seeking her out specifically, knowing she understood what they were going through because she'd survived it herself. 6 months later, I received a call from Meredith that made my heart swell with pride. "Mom, are you sitting down?" "Should I be?" "I just got off the phone with the Illinois Supreme Court. They want to admit me to their bar. It's one of the highest honors in the state, reserved for attorneys who've made significant contributions to the legal profession." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. "Your father would be so proud." "I know." Her voice was soft. "I wish he could have seen this. Wish he could have seen me become strong again." "He sees it," I said. "Wherever he is, Thomas sees you, and he's bursting with pride." The admission ceremony was held in downtown Chicago at the state Supreme Court building. I sat in the front row, watching my daughter raise her right hand and take the oath. She wore a navy suit and her grandmother's pearls, the ones we'd rescued from Ryan's house that day. Her head was held high, her voice strong and clear. The bruises were long gone, but the strength that had grown in their place remained. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd of well-wishers and colleagues. "Thank you," she said simply. "For seeing what I couldn't see. For planning what I couldn't plan. For being exactly what I needed when I needed it most." "I'm your mother," I replied, touching her cheek gently. "Protecting you isn't optional, it's wired into my DNA. I just wish I'd acted sooner." "You acted exactly when you needed to," she corrected. "If you'd pushed too early, I wouldn't have been ready. I needed to hit bottom before I could start climbing back up." "Your father would be so proud of you," I said again, because it bore repeating. "Of your strength, your resilience, your decision to turn your trauma into purpose." She smiled, genuine and bright. "He'd be proud of both of us. You taught me that revenge isn't about destruction, it's about building something better from the ashes. And that's exactly what we did." 3 years after that night at 2 in the morning, I was working in my study when my phone rang. Meredith's name on the screen always made me smile now instead of fear the worst. "Mom, are you sitting down? You keep asking me that. Should I start assuming all your news requires sitting?" She laughed, a sound that had been rare for so long and was now wonderfully common. "The governor's office just called. They want to nominate me for a judgeship in family court." I sat down hard in my desk chair. A judgeship? I know. I can barely process it myself. But apparently my work with abuse survivors and complex financial cases has impressed some important people. They think I'd bring valuable perspective to the bench. You absolutely would. You understand what victims go through because you've been there. You understand how abusers manipulate the system because you've seen it firsthand. That's essentially what the governor's chief of staff said. She told me they've been looking for someone who combines legal expertise with personal understanding of domestic violence dynamics. Someone who won't let wealthy defendants buy their way out of consequences. When do you find out officially? The nomination gets announced next month. Then there's a confirmation process, but she seemed confident it would go through. After we hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, thinking about the journey we'd traveled. From that desperate night when Meredith collapsed on my doorstep, beaten and terrified, to this moment when she was being considered for one of the most important positions in the state legal system, the transformation was complete. I pulled up my computer and checked the quarterly report from our investigative firm's corrections monitoring service. Ryan Brennan was currently housed at a federal facility in Pennsylvania. According to the latest report, he spent most of his time in the law library, filing appeal after unsuccessful appeal. His most recent filing had argued that his conviction was unfair because the evidence against him had been gathered improperly. The appeals court had rejected it in a tersely worded decision that essentially called his arguments frivolous. Some people never learned. Ryan still believed he was the victim in this story, that he'd been unfairly targeted, that his wealth and connections should have protected him from consequences, that he'd learned the wrong lesson from his downfall. The lesson wasn't that he'd been caught, it was that what he'd done was fundamentally wrong. But narcissists rarely achieve that kind of self-awareness. That evening, I returned home to find a package on my doorstep. Inside was a framed photograph, Meredith at her Supreme Court admission ceremony, beaming with pride and strength. On the back, she'd written in her clear handwriting, "To Mom, who taught me that revenge isn't about destruction, it's about building something better from the ashes. You showed me that justice takes patience, that healing takes time, and that sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies is to become so successful they can't touch you. Love always, Meredith." I hung it in my study, right next to the photograph of Thomas on the day he founded Ashford and Klein Investigations 30 years ago. 2 generations of our family who understood that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about making sure the next person doesn't suffer the same fate. If Ryan Brennan's downfall had sent a message through Chicago's wealthy circles, it was this: abuse and fraud wouldn't be tolerated, no matter how much money you had or who your family knew. Women like Meredith wouldn't just disappear quietly anymore. They'd fight back with every legal weapon available, and they'd win. Perhaps we'd started a reckoning. Perhaps other women trapped in abusive marriages saw Meredith's story and found the courage to leave. Perhaps other wealthy criminals thought twice before believing their money made them untouchable. I like to think so. 6 months later, Meredith's judgeship was confirmed unanimously. I sat in the same courtroom where her admission ceremony had been held, watching her take the oath of office as a family court judge. I, Meredith Ashford, do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as judge under the Constitution and laws of the United States and the state of Illinois. Her voice rang clear and strong through the courtroom. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Attorneys who'd worked with her, clients she'd helped, advocates who'd watched her transform trauma into purpose, and me, her mother, crying unashamedly in the front row. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at her favorite restaurant. Over wine and excellent food, she told me about her plans for the bench. "I want to make sure that abusers can't manipulate the system anymore," she said. "I've seen too many cases where wealthy defendants use expensive lawyers and delays and procedural tricks to avoid consequences. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen in my courtroom. Your father would love that, I said. He always believed the justice system should protect the vulnerable, not the powerful. I learned from both of you, she replied. Dad taught me to build ironclad cases. You taught me to be patient and strategic. Together, those lessons made me who I am today. We raised our glasses in a toast to justice, to healing, to the future we'd fought so hard to claim. As for Ryan Brennan, I still receive quarterly updates on his status. He's currently serving year 3 of his 32-year sentence. The prison reports indicate he's kept to himself mostly, avoided trouble, filed his endless appeals that go nowhere. He'll be 73 years old before he's eligible for parole. By then, Meredith will likely be retired from the bench after a distinguished career protecting other women from men just like him. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's simple: never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse strategic patience for fear. And never, ever underestimate a mother's love for her child. It's the most dangerous force in the world when someone threatens what we hold most precious. Ryan Brennan learned that lesson 32 years too late, but my daughter learned a different lesson, and she learned it just in time, that you can survive the worst thing that ever happens to you. That you can take your broken pieces and forge them into something stronger than you were before. That justice might be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied, and most importantly, that you're never truly alone as long as someone loves you enough to fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. That night at 2 a.m, when Meredith collapsed on my doorstep, broken and beaten and terrified, that was her lowest moment. But it was also the beginning of her greatest triumph. Sometimes you have to fall completely apart before you can put yourself back together in a way that's truly unbreakable. And when you do, when you rise from those ashes stronger and fiercer than before, the people who tried to destroy you realize they've made a terrible mistake. They didn't break you. They forged you, and that makes all the difference. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt trapped or invisible or diminished by someone who should have loved you, I want you to know something: your worth isn't determined by how someone else treated you. Your value doesn't decrease because someone failed to see it. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in justice, not just revenge. Justice means building something better, becoming something stronger, refusing to let your trauma define your future. Leave a comment below if you or someone you know has escaped an abusive situation. Your story matters. Your survival matters. And sharing these stories helps others find the courage to leave when they're ready. And if you're still trapped, if you're reading this and thinking that could never be me, please know this: it can be you. It will be you when you're ready. There are people who will help. Organizations that will support you. Mothers like me who will fight for you. You just have to take that first step. Thank you for watching Revenge with Alice. Remember, silence isn't weakness. Strategic patience isn't fear. And a mother's love? That's the most powerful force in the universe. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve less than complete respect and dignity. God bless you all.